Okay, we'll start with this. Well, in a recent Q&A, light heavyweight contender, prospect, Anthony Yarde said he feels that his power is on the level with Kovalev, Stevenson, and Beterbiev. And this Q&A covered, his progress so far in the light heavyweight division, things that have happened in the past and things he hopes to happen in the future. But the reason this caught my attention is because of the question that it poses. The question that it poses to whoever's reading the article. Do you guys feel that Anthony Yarde's power is on the level with Kovalev, Stevenson, and Beterbiev?
Do you?
For me, it's an interesting question, because, if somebody asks me, do I think his power is on the level with those three guys? I'd have to say that, you know what? I don't know. The answer to that question really hasn't been revealed to us. And here's why.
Why?
Anthony Yarde, he's on the bring-along process. It's a necessity for some fighters depending on their amateur background or the lack thereof. The lack thereof being Anthony Yarde's case, that this guy, he don't come from, an extensive amateur background, so he's got to get most of his experience on the job. In which case, he's fighting in showcase fights against opportunistic opponents. Whether you think that's okay or not is besides the point, because these are the kind of fights that he's fighting. In which case, if you're not fighting world-level guys, if you're not fighting those top contenders, we really don't know if you're that big a puncher, or it's just that
your opponents suck.
It looks that way because of the people you're fighting. So I don't know if you're as big a puncher as a Kovalev, a Stevenson, or a Beterbiev, because those guys have shown their power against more bankable opponents than you have. Anthony Yarde sports a professional record of 16-0 with 15 KOs. He's got a 94% KO percentage. But who's to say that if he steps up in competition, he can maintain them kind of numbers? You understand? Who's to say that if he's out there fighting the Sullivan Barreras of the division, or the big punchers like a Joe Smith Jr., who's to say that if he comes up against opponents that can offer some resistance, opponents that can push back, who's to say that his numbers are going to stay that high, that his power will seem as bankable as it does right now? Understand that, it does happen in the sport of boxing that as you step up in competition, guys get harder to knock out. And things about your power, they become revealed. You understand? So if someone asks me, do I think that Anthony Yarde's power, not his skill, but his power, do I think his power is on the level of a Kovalev or a Stevenson or a Beterbiev, I'd have to say, you know what? No, not yet. We haven't seen that yet. We don't know. He's got to answer that question when he steps up in competition. And if he still keeps putting guys on their ass, if he still keeps, powering through these guys, then we can say, yes, his power's definitely on the level with those guys. Maybe not above it, but certainly not below it. But as it stands today, that's not a question that can really be answered. Time will tell if Anthony Yarde packs the kind of punch that those guys pack. Because until he steps up in competition, we're just not going to know. For now, he's fighting in opportunistic fights, showcase fights, bring-along fights against bring-along kinds of opponents. So those kinds of guys, they're really not going to give you the answer to that question. We know that Anthony Yarde's handlers, they've turned down 1 or 2 world title opportunities. So that should lend at least a little bit of insight into the situation, that while this kid might be a decent-sized puncher, if the knockouts are coming this easily, or if he's looking this way, if his power is looking this way, it might have something to do with who he's fighting. It could be that way. Most I can add to this situation is, as it stands today, we don't know. We don't know that he's necessarily a monster puncher or that his opponents are that bad, and they really don't have anything to offset his power. Could be that way. Or it could be that he really is that much of a big puncher, and time will tell that story. Most I can say is, I can't say that he is, can't say that he isn't. And until he steps up in competition, we're just not going to know. And speaking of contenders that are on the come up, Abel Sanchez says, by the end of 2019, Joyce will be ready for Wilder and Joshua. Sanchez wants his fighter to be fully ready for everyone by next year. We want to improve. Everything is a weakness, and we will improve the weaknesses. If we only look at strengths, then we won't get better. I look at things to improve. We will videotape him so he sees the improvement and can replicate things that we want him to do. We're hopeful that by the end of this year, he's had a couple of fights, depending on who he's matched against. People will demand a certain level of fight from him. I hope he has significant fights. By the first quarter of next year, he will face world-class opponents. There's no time frame, because it depends on how Joe develops. By the end of next year, he will be 11-0 or 12-0 and ready to challenge for Joshua's title, Deontay Wilder's title, or whoever has them at that time. Those guys have certain qualities which we must master and become better than them at. Our advantage is that we look at them now to prepare for the day when we fight them. Every day and every fight must be a learning experience, Joyce said. You know, Joe Joyce, he hasn't been able to get the kind of fights that he's wanted to get so far. But now that he's with Al Heyman, he's with the PBC, and he's got Abel Sanchez training him, I think that he'll find himself in more fortuitous situations. I think he'll find himself in the kind of situations that he wants to be in and the kind of situations that are conducive towards his progress. You know, in some ways, he's in a fortuitous situation because of the state of the heavyweight division right now. That most people that are talking about the heavyweight division, they're not paying too much attention to all the other guys that are in it. They're only paying attention to a certain pool of guys, certain names. Names like Deontay Wilder, names like Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, a top contender here and there like Luis Ortiz or Dylan White. And the fact that so much of the attention is fixated on this pool of guys, that allows Joe Joyce to grow and progress in the background, so that when the day comes that he does have to square off against a champion, maybe, just maybe, he'll be ready for it. It can be fortunate. It can be viewed as a fortunate situation when so many of the relevant players in a division, the champions and a lot of the top contenders, they got their crosshairs on each other. They're not paying a guy like Joe Joyce any mind, you understand? He's got a ways to go. And for that reason, they're not paying him any mind. So he can use that to his advantage. Improve, hone his skills, garner experience, so that when the day comes that he's got to fight some of these guys, they may be in for a rude awakening. They may be in for a surprise. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't like Abel Sanchez, but that's mostly because of things that he said. If you ask me, do I think that he can help Joe Joyce on this journey? I'd say yes. I think that he can turn Joe Joyce into a world-class, world-level fighter. I think that he can. That's in spite of all the other shit, you know, but the other shit, that's outside shit. That's shit that he said. I'm talking about his ability as a trainer to turn Joe Joyce into a world-class fighter. Yeah, I think Abel can do it. Nah, I don't know that he can do it by the end of 2019. I'll be honest that I don't think Joe Joyce is going to be ready for those guys. You know, that pool of names, Wilder, Joshua. I don't think that he's going to be ready for those guys by the end of 2019. But I'd say, year or two. He'll definitely be ready. And all of this is going to be based on the progress that he exhibits fight by fight. So there's not even actually a time constraint here. I think that as all the different storylines of the heavyweight division unfold, Joe Joyce can develop behind the scenes gradually till he ultimately fights for a world title. Like I said, I don't think it happens as soon as the end of 2019. That seems ahead of schedule. I'd say year or two. Joe Joyce is ready. And I think with the help of Abel Sanchez, he will be ready. Now, in other news, yesterday, the World Boxing Super Series announced that the third division that's going to be featured in the second season of the World Boxing Super Series, the third division is going to be the cruiserweight division. Now, some people didn't react. You know, some people weren't too happy about it because, well, we just saw the cruiserweight. You know, we saw the who's who of the cruiserweight division fight already, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have all those guys fighting when there's not going to be a belt on the line. Usyk's got all the belts, and the only inference I can make is that maybe the winner of the tournament will become his mandatory challenger. Not completely sure. Obviously, there's more there to think about, and there are some rumored names for the tournament. There are some names, some familiar names, and some names that are actually interesting. Mairis Bradis, Junior Dorticos, Murat Gassiev. These names are rumored to be participating in the second phase of the World Boxing Super Series. They're going to be coming back. They're going to be competing again. And for what it's worth, hey, we saw what those guys did in the first phase of this, you know, in the first season. We saw that those guys, that they gave us some really good fights. So even though they already participated in the first season, I don't really have any aversions to them participating in the second season because we know that these guys can really put on a show. But the one name that really caught my attention that makes this interesting is Andrew Tabiti. You see, Andrew Tabiti didn't participate in the first season of the World Boxing Super Series. That in mind, you know, it's hard for a guy like Andrew Tabiti to really make a name for himself when so many of the big names in a division are wrapped up in a tournament like this. I'm hoping that these rumors check out. I'm hoping that he is participating in the World Boxing Super Series because this is a good opportunity for him to really make a name for himself. If the second season of the World Boxing Super Series kicks off and he's not a part of it, I struggle thinking who he's going to be fighting. You know, okay, so you're not in the tournament. Well, all the main guys are participating in the tournament. They participated in the first first season, and they participated in the second season. They're going to be participating. And if you're not in that tournament, then who the hell are you going to be fighting? It's for this reason that I'm hoping these rumors check out, and that Tabiti will be participating in the tournament this time, because many of the relevant players in the cruiserweight division, they're going to be in it again. In which case, if you plan on fighting a somebody to become a somebody, needs to be in that second season. Andrew Tabiti sports a professional record of 16-0 with 13 KOs. His most notable wins so far are a knockout win over Latif Coyote, very familiar name, Steve Cunningham, and Keith Tapia. He gave Keith Tapia his first professional loss. Now, for all intents and purposes, Andrew Tabiti is on the right track. He actually is. You know, he has been fighting the right kind of people. Experienced guys like Latif Coyote and Steve Cunningham. Those are the right kind of guys for him to be fighting right now, because he needs to face those world-level journeymen so that he can really get that experience. Fight an opponent that can push back. So he is on the right track. And I think participating in the second season of the tournament, I think participating in it, that's about the best thing he can be doing right now. You know, the cruiserweight division, it doesn't get a lot of coverage on this side of the Atlantic. It's mostly because there's not a large American presence in that division, so most American boxing fans, they don't really know many of the fighters that are there. It's a wonder that they even know Usyk. Even though Usyk is a hard guy to ignore, all things considered. I mean, this guy's a great fighter. But back to the point, the cruiserweight division doesn't get a lot of shine. And if you're an American fighter like Andrew Tabiti, well, that's not very good. You know, that's counterproductive. So he really needs to make a splash there to get himself attention, because he's already in a division that most Americans don't follow. He needs to really kick some ass and, you know, take some names and kick some ass. That way the American fight fans will become acquainted with him. So far, you know, he's gone largely under the radar, and Andrew Tabiti is a well-rounded fighter. He shows a lot of virtues, but most people don't know what those virtues are because cruiserweight division doesn't get much coverage. So let's hope that these rumors check out and that he is participating in the second season so that we can see him square off against the Dorticos, against the Gassiev, against the Maris Bradis. Let's hope that we get to see Andrew Tabiti in this tournament fighting those kinds of guys, because right about now, those are the kinds of guys that he should be fighting.